Hi everyone, I'm Stan Mallow. Welcome to Paranormal Yakker. My guest today is renowned Iowa-based trial attorney and certified civil trial specialist Christopher Johnston, a lifelong ufologist with a background in astrobiology and space law. He is also an active member of MUFON and the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. Both organizations, which I'm proud to say I'm a member of, also are at the forefront in seeking full disclosure from governments about what they know regarding the existence of UFOs, UAPs, and that they have been and still are visiting our planet. I'll be talking with Christopher about his book, Roswell, The Truth on Trial, The Evidence Speaks, You Decide. Christopher Johnston, welcome to Paranormal Yakker.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Stan. Good to see you.
When, Christopher, did you first become interested in exploring the UFO UAP phenomena, and what was the catalyst that sparked that interest?
Great question. And I always find the answer somewhat funny. I was born in 69, so I'm 55 now. The 70s, especially after Stanton Friedman kind of got into the Roswell stuff, was in the 70s. And my dad was the world's biggest sci-fi fan. You want to meet anything he could read, anything he could write. So I like to say, some kids bonded playing catch, some kids bonded with their dad going fishing. For me, it was sitting on the patio and watching the stars. And he was kind of an outlandish guy, and he was convinced, UFO any day now, right here in the backyard. So if I wanted to hang with dad, you get the mutual interests. So it was really, that was the catalyst behind it, kind of a father-son thing. And then as got older, developed my own kind of interests and sub-interests in the category, and I just took it from there.
What was there about the Roswell incident that ignited your creative juices and academic curiosity to the point where you went full stream ahead with devoting a significant amount of your time and energy to writing the novel you did about it?
Unfortunately, the answer is not as sexy as I might have had hoped, but the reality of it is when I decided to write a book, what I wanted to do, a couple of things. I wanted to blend my passions, which are trial work and UFOs. I do have some other ones, but for the purposes of this, I wanted to figure out a way to bring those two things together and at the same time, maybe shed a little light on trial procedure and what really happens in the courtroom. So that was sort of the thought process. And truth be told, when I started, my first thought was, well, Travis Walton. And then it was Betty and Barney Hill. The big issue was I didn't know if this was going to be a one-time deal for me or how this was going to go. Roswell, I knew, had the source material that I could have written a 10,000 page book on it, and a lot of different sources. You get into some of the other stories, even Travis Walton, for example, got his friends, we've got the police, and it's a great, great story. But there just wasn't enough there, I didn't think, to create a narrative with a trial. So Roswell, again, one of the oldest ones, biggest ones, a million, witnesses to varying degrees. So I knew the source material would be there to do this.
In your reimagining of the 1947 crash of a UFO in Roswell, New Mexico, you have a jury trial where the incident itself is on trial, complete with opening statements, witness testimony, closing arguments, placing the reader in the role of juror. What I would like to know, Christopher, is that in your role as author, who is quite obviously all of the characters in your novel, how difficult was it for you to not play favorites and give one character or side, be they believer or skeptic, an upper hand in what you are writing?
That is a great question. You're the first person to ask me that. Yes, I am. So right now I'm sitting in my law office. I have a courtroom in here, thus why it looks the way it does behind me. I am a plaintiff lawyer. I'm in my 25th year of practice. And what do we know about attorneys? We are to be zealous advocates, right? Is the formal form for our clients. So writing this book, it was very hard. I'm not a judge. I don't want to be a judge. I'm not this neutral, finder, decider of law. So yes, when I started writing as a plaintiff lawyer, so in the book, in a civil case, you're going to have your plaintiffs and your defendants. For purposes of the book, I set it up with believers and skeptics. It just seemed easier and, a little bit quirky. And as a typical zealous advocate, when I started writing the testimony, I found myself really drilling down, going, oh, I got it this time. I got it. Boy, I'm going to set it up this way. And frequently stopping going, oh, that's not my job here. My job is to simply present the facts. So it was very challenging to do that. And I should say, I mentioned when I wrote the testimony, that's only partially true. I wrote all the questioning. The answers given by the witnesses those answers were not created in the mind of Chris Johnston. Those answers came from prior interviews that the witnesses gave, prior statements that the witnesses gave. Although my book, I have to disclose it as fiction for any number of reasons, the testimony itself is actually things that were said before. So it certainly took some brain training to think more like a judge and not like an advocate. So really interesting question.
Thank you. And thank you for your answer. I was curious about that. An incredible number of people from all sides of the spectrum were part of the Roswell story and were key in the unfolding of what happened or didn't happen in July of 1947. You touched on it previously, but I'd like to know what resources, Christopher, did you use in researching and acquiring the information you incorporated in Roswell, The Truth on Trial?
Everything that I used was public record. Now, I had to certainly do some digging for some of it, but my sources were there's a lot of open copyright material out there, particularly for the really old, the things from right around the time of the event. And so that is all public record and available in a lot of different places. A lot of the .govs, I was able to find, pieces of interviews. And then, honestly, other people's books, other people's research, which I'm not a big one on just taking, well, Stan said, right? So, because again, hearsay. So even when relying on information like that, I would fact check the best that I could as far as what was being put out by other authors. So I just put my, cast a wide net for everything that was out there. Well, not everything within reason. And then I selected out. Again, I had kind of two hurdles in picking my witnesses. One, I could have written 10,000 pages and not had all the Roswell stuff in there. So I had to be very intentional about the witnesses that I was calling. One, I didn't want the guy or the gal that was way, way, way over here for the believers and way, way, way over here for the skeptics, because I wanted the jurors, the readers, to see it as a bit of more of a close call. So it was very intentional from that standpoint. And then the witnesses also had to be able, because let's face it, the story, I know the story. A lot of people don't know the story. So the witnesses I chose also had to be able to carry the narrative of the story. So that's how I went about, once I had the material, selecting who I was going to be using. And in some cases, I knew the names and I went seeking material, and other times I came across some material and had to go seeking the name.
As stated in my introduction, Christopher, you have a background in space law. Specifically, you earned a certification in it through the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, often referred to by its acronym, ANUSA. According to what I've read about it, their mandate is to promote international cooperation in the peaceful use and exploration of space. Considering the sad state of affairs the world is in today, I was wondering, Christopher, how successful has USA been in fulfilling its mandate?
Not very, in my opinion. And, in that isn't necessarily specific just to the outer space affairs. But when you get into the world of international law, which space law is, so you get the UN involved and we have treaties. So we've got this treaty that we're going to not do or we're going to do. But for the most part, the treaties are toothless. There's, for your listeners, there's 5 primary treaties. Now there's been some addendums over the years, but anybody can Google, hey, show me the UN, the 5 main treaties of outer space. And they're not written horribly in legalese. They're pretty easy to understand. But for example, one of the big ones that is coming to mind is we, and by we, any signatories to these treaties cannot mine on the moon. So it's right in the treaty. Well, what do we know? At least China, and I'm not going to say they're the only ones. What are we hearing about right now? Well, we're going to get up, we're going to mine on the moon. There's all these rare metals. And the UN, they can't do anything about it except, wave a treaty at them, go, hey, we got this treaty. Well, as you said yourself, in this day and age and in this world, it's not too compelling just to do things because it's the right thing to do. So I think the UN, very well intentioned, very much, providing a backbone for how things should be or how things might be or can be. But as far as when the rubber hits the road, it's kind of, there's some nice treaties, but not a heck of a lot being done because of them.
Regretfully, I thought that's what you might say, but I was hoping that I'd be wrong, but it is what it is. Now, Christopher, although I'm tempted to do it, I'm not going to ask you how you would vote if you were a member of the jury at the UFO trial of the century. And if I did, you'd probably plead the fifth. So I'm not going to do it. However, I would be curious to know if, from the feedback you received from readers of your novel, if a majority voted yay or nay.
I don't have that. The majority of people that have read it have all said this, though, regardless of what side you're on, was this. Boy, I always thought this was like a for sure thing till I read your book. Now I'm not so sure. And the skeptics go the other way. Oh, I thought this was a bunch of garbage till I read your book, and it's kind of interesting. So in that right there, that's a win for me as the author, because everyone in every realm has their kind of own drives and their own desires. One thing that I am a big believer in is weighing evidence and being a little more critical and not just looking at a headline and going, oh, see? Like in my book and in an article, in fact, that I did for a MUFON journal, I took a couple of UFO scenarios and then I applied what are called the federal rules of evidence to the article. And it's, no, not everybody needs to be a lawyer, but you start looking at things like bias. You start looking at financial gain, which is tied into bias. You start even the most basic ones. Well, hearsay, and I can put a quarter in me and I start talking. For example, we are hearing a lot about the congressional hearings just happening are happening. And we heard a lot about Mr. Grush. And that was kind of exciting, kind of interesting. But if you strip back, get rid of the headlines, I heard an awful lot of hearsay. I heard a lot of, well, I've interviewed 40 plus people and they said, okay, as soon as you hear the they said, well, red flag, that's nothing. I could say, well, Stan said, it means nothing. Now, and I don't want to minimize his role or what he's trying to do, because he did say, hey, I do know some other stuff that I could probably tell you about in a skiff, where it's more confidential. But what really came out to the Stans and Chris's of the world was kind of more of the same. Well, I've heard, and this guy told me. That's not evidence. Yet people will jump right on and go, oh, did you hear what he said? It's real. No, that's not what he said. And that's one of the nice things about the book. And if you approach it kind of from a cross-examination standpoint, it helps at least peel back some of the hoo-ha and can show people really what are we being told.
Should viewers of Paranormal Yakker want to buy Roswell, The Truth on Trial, The Evidence Speaks, you decide. How, Christopher, can they do that?
Sure. Thanks for asking. The easiest way, and yes, a little bit of shameful self-promotion, if you go to my law firm website, which is lawgroupofiowa.com, About halfway down on the homepage is a big red button, buy Chris's book, and then it has a picture of the book itself. So yes, you can certainly, it's available on Amazon, so folks can go to Amazon, but my website's pretty cool too, and there's some stuff to see there, a lot of history on it. So lawgroupofiowa.com and look for the big red button.
Perfect. Christopher Johnston, I thank you for being my guest on Paranormal Yakker. Yakking with you has been an enjoyable experience, and I look forward to seeing your novel when it's turned into a movie or series, something I'm positive will happen in the not too distant future.
Well, I hope so. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Hi, everyone. This is Stan Mallon of Paranormal Yakker. I hope you enjoyed the interview you just watched. So that you don't miss any upcoming shows, be sure to subscribe to my free YouTube channel. To do that, just press the subscribe button on your screen.